Hello and welcome. I am Zabraxley. Quiet. Do you hear that? That silence? It's weird, right? They say that it's been caused by the lack of Nintendo exclusive Rareware games. Wow. It has been decades now, hasn't it? It's honestly been so long that oftentimes I forget that their partnership was ever even a thing, like an ancient myth or some long-forgotten legend. But I remember those golden years. It was something truly magical back in the before times. But it actually makes me think, though, what actually was the last game that those two made together? I don't remember. Rareware, oh my dearly beloved Rareware. I know that ye are not dead, but it will never quite be the same, will it? Your beautiful logo, your soundtracks that will never die, your streak of critically adored releases was so strong during the 90s that it still gets me so hot and bothered that every time I think about it, I have to go take a cold shower. Holy shit! As much as gamers TM like to argue about, well, literally everything, the success of Rareware in the 90s and early 2000s is one of the very, very few topics that tends to unify us. That one thing we all seem to agree on. Even if you didn't play their games during the SNES and N64 era, there's still this reverence that everyone seems to give them. Everyone just loves Rareware. Hey, do you like Rareware? No, I don't like them, but I do love them. See? Every living person loves Rareware. Seriously though, I'm not just trying to hype them up for the sake of dramatic effect. There was genuinely about a 10 or so year period where everything that the studio touched was good at its worst and legendary at its best. Within the N64 era, we received hit after hit after hit after hit, and a few of the greatest games of an entire generation would be here, some of which would redefine the entire industry moving forward. I would argue that Rareware's release lineup from 1994 to 2001 is one of the most insane records gaming has never seen replicated. Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct, Donkey Kong Country 2, Donkey Kong Country 3, Killer Instinct Gold, Blast Corps, GoldenEye, Diddy Kong Racing, Banjo-Kazooie, Jet Force Gemini, Donkey Kong 64, Mickey Speedway USA, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Tooie, and Conker's Bad Fur Day. Oh my god! So many good games. Just so many masterpieces. It's too much. It's too much! It almost feels unreal, the lineup of not just good games, but some of the greatest. I mean, Donkey Kong Country 2 is seriously almost perfect, and say what you want about GoldenEye, but without it, the console shooter would never be as big as it is today. I mean, the entire development of titles like Halo often credit GoldenEye specifically for its inspiration. And heck, if you really want to hate on GoldenEye, then you just move on to Perfect Dark, which blows GoldenEye out of the water anyway, but Rareware just couldn't stop making masterpieces. Not only did we get some of the greatest games on the N64, well, mostly because Rareware is responsible for like half of that console's library, but some of the best games of all time, and I'm not saying that lightly. The development teams at Rare constantly outdid themselves and each other on each subsequent title. And the range of genres? What is this? We got first-person shooters, third-person shooters, 3D action games, tournament fighters, kart racers, 3D collectathons, and a giant movie parody disguised as a video game. It's too much! Living through this time was so magical that it was borderline exhausting. My body was not ready for so many of my favorite games to slam into me one after another after another after another after another. They could not seem to make a bad game. They couldn't seem to fail. And no one could tell them what to do. Except Nintendo. So yeah, the story goes that Rareware was developing a game called Dinosaur Planet with Timber from Diddy Kong Racing as the main character. Yeah, this little guy. According to Kev Bayless, a former artist for Rareware, quote, "In Dinosaur Planet, Timber was going to be a time-traveling tiger," end quote. Yo, that's awesome. And funny enough, this actually wasn't the only time that Timber was supposed to be the main character. He was also supposed to be the lead in a title called RC Pro-Am 64, which, after some recommendations from Nintendo, ended up turning into the best kart racer on the Nintendo 64, Diddy Kong Racing. Yeah. Yeah, take that one, Mario Kart fans. However, after some back and forth about character designs and a pretty drastic evolution in story, Timber was swapped out for 2 new characters in this Dinosaur Planet game. Poor little guy, he got axed twice. Our new heroes now would become Saber the Fox and Krystal, the internet's furry fantasy. Miyamoto then comes in, sees that there are 2 Fox characters, and recommends Rareware rework the entire game they've been making into something else based on Nintendo characters, and bam! No more Dinosaur Planet. Well, actually, the details of the story change a bit depending on whom is asked. Whether it was truly High Overlord Shigeru's idea or not is actually often in question, but either way, Dinosaur Planet was to change into a new game with some of the basic ideas carrying over, but most of which would need to be completely redone. This may sound like a terrible idea at first, mostly because it kind of is, but to give credit where credit is due, Nintendo did the exact same thing with RC Pro-Am 64 and Diddy Kong Racing, and I don't think there were too many people who were upset by that change. Oh, and if you do happen to know anybody who hates Diddy Kong Racing, just point at him and step away. I'll handle the rest. Okay, so it wasn't Dinosaur Planet that was the last Nintendo console exclusive by Rare, but what was? I remember Conker's Bad Fur Day coming out in 2001, and I remember Grad by the Ghoulies coming out in 2003 after Microsoft had already bought Rare. But there was something else, like right in the middle. What the heck? Well, that didn't make any sense. Oh! Son of a bitch, that hurt! What was that? Oh, this is it. This is it. This is the one. I remember playing this back in the day, though I don't really remember it. I remember getting my ass beat on that test of strength part, and I remember Fox beating things with a staff instead of shooting his gun, but there's so much about this that I don't remember. But hey, well, I guess we get to play it again, so let's do it. Taking off into the conversation about Star Fox Adventures requires a bit of grace, might be the best word I can come up with. Whether you are a fan, a hater, or a confused hating fan, there's definitely a bit to say about this game. Right off the bat, we start off with not Star Fox riding on a dinosaur bird as Blue Babe over here shoots fireballs into the back of a ship that she's chasing down in the sky. We don't seem to have a strong understanding as to why she's here other than a distress signal was sent out, and Krystal here apparently wanted to help instead of something about her dead parents or something. After beating the ship in a game of not quite Star Fox, but seems like a little bit like Star Fox, we walk around the floating boat and accomplish basically nothing until we bump into this random bird in a cage. Yeah, this bird seriously just feels so out of place. I don't know what the purpose of it is. Then we meet our villain named General Scales, who is a proud, self-proclaimed tyrant and dictator, but so far the only thing we can tell about him is that he is so powerful that he keeps an itty-bitty bird inside a cage. Wow. In all seriousness though, for real, this guy's actually awesome. I mean, his voice is menacing.
Moak, aumdekulak. Ut neokraju ui kimonect.
But the most badass thing the guy does here is when he just grabs Krystal by the neck and literally drags her body across the deck of the ship, only to toss her overboard. Oh my goodness. Yeah, seriously, this whole delivery of just him dragging her body as he has her gripped here is just such an awesome detail to emphasize just how little this guy seems to care about the lives of those in his way. Thankfully for the game itself to continue, Krystal here is saved by her bird companion, shows up to the Chrysalia Palace to find a bunch of dying dinosaurs, engages in one of the most dreadfully boring opening Zelda-like tutorials the world has ever seen, gets one of the Chrysalia spirits, and then gets surprise attacked as she is imprisoned by a giant crystal. And then, do you hear that? Do you hear it? Here they are! This is it! This is the crew! The team! The mercenaries! Team Star Fox, who basically just shows up and stole the show from that blue girl from earlier? Yeah, Yeah, these are the guys I love. I love this team. I don't care about what just happened at all. Honestly, I really couldn't care. I don't care about the dying dinosaurs. I don't care about the blue girl. I don't care about Edo Suk Tavuk General Scales. The game just kind of throws the Star Fox crew at me, and I just want to hop in a Landmaster on an Arwing and hang out with the boys. I don't care about the rest of this thing. And it's at this point where there's two paths for Star Fox Adventures players. One road leads down to a group of people who love this game dearly for what it is, and another just wonders, why does it say Star Fox in the title? Honestly, for me personally, I think I'm still at the fork itself, and I'm afraid to pick which one to go down because I don't really like either crew. Everything is just a bit odd about Star Fox Adventures. It feels like a constant changing of emotions, like every step further through the journey is equal parts, "Oh, well, that was pretty cool," and then followed up shortly after with, "The hell was that?" One of the greatest examples of this is, well, right at the beginning, after you first take control of Fox McCloud. In true Star Fox fashion, you hop into an Arwing and set off into space. But since this is Star Fox Adventures, the question becomes, how are they gonna screw this up? Oh wait, hold up. Yo, these controls are actually awesome. Everything feels so smooth. I can do a barrel roll, I got bombs, I can charge shot. Hell yeah, this is actually great. This feels like an amazing evolution of the gameplay from Star Fox 64. I am totally down for this. And the level's done. A minute and a half goes by, and that's it. It's done. You get out of the Arwing, and you start running around the surface of Dinosaur Planet. And that's it. Now, granted, the movement and control of Fox himself is also great. He feels like he's got some weight, the movement is clean, and honestly this is something I've always wanted to be able to do ever since the Star Fox 64 multiplayer let you get out of the Arwing. I know this might be a hot take to some, but this is awesome. But you know what else was awesome until it ended too damn fast? That level we just did that ended faster than it took for me to get bored of dicking around moving the logo in the Star Fox 64 title screen. The fact that the controls in the air were that good, the fact that the music was a perfect remaster of the Meteo theme from 64, the fact we had that little General Pepper mission briefing and it was done so well, and the way the characters yell at you through the communication system, it just felt so natural like the previous games. All of that was so good, and Rareware should genuinely pat themselves on the back, because if that was all the context we had for this game, it would appear to be the opening of a phenomenal GameCube Star Fox adventure that every Star Fox fan was dying for. I mean, the fact that there was no good luck at the start of the stage was a bit disappointing, I gotta be honest there, but this whole bit is just a tease. This isn't the only Arwing section either. Every single time you navigate to Dinosaur Planet, or one of its broken planetary fragments, you do an Arwing level. And then the gameplay during them is amazing, but the stages blow by so fast that they end up feeling more like an annoyance rather than an extension of Star Fox mechanics in a new 3D adventure game. And the thing is, this doesn't help anyone. I mean, if you're a Star Fox fan who wants more of these space levels because it's a Star Fox on the box, or you're someone who wants a more traditional adventure Zelda-style game, and now you're just sitting here wondering, what the hell are all these space levels doing in my game? I mean, honestly, there is one thing that we all can do. There's one thing that would make all of this better for basically everyone, and that's to remake The Legend of Dragoon. That's the way we solve all of the world's problems. So, here's the thing. Whether you knew beforehand whether this adventure was going to be a proper Star Fox game or not is made pretty irrelevant by the first 20 to 30 minutes of the experience. There really is no surprise, no delay, no bait and switch about what this game really is. Whether you followed the original advertising of Dinosaur Planet on trade shows or played the opening of this title itself, there's a clear expectation set of what you'll be engaging with for the long haul. Sure, the first few minutes might be a bit of a shock. Perhaps that first Arwing section will surprise you as it comes to an abrupt end as Fox is then thrown out into the world, but these first steps on the planet itself, this is the game. This is the journey you are about to embark on. This is where you have to ask yourself some questions before moving forward. Are you looking for a 3D action adventure game? If yes, then proceed. Are you intrigued by the idea of a Star Fox spin-off that plays more like a Zelda cross Jet Force Gemini hybrid? Then hey, this could be a good time. Are you looking for that pure, unadulterated Buck Bumble experience? Then I feel ya. But this ain't gonna be it, Chief. I know that this isn't the Star Fox game so many people wanted. I get that. Trust me. I very, very much get that. It's extremely frustrating considering the first game in the series was a technical marvel and the second game ever released was a legendary masterpiece, but also in its own right was just a remake of the original. So this was a pretty big opportunity for Star Fox fans to finally get a brand new adventure, which is super exciting. But yeah, reading that title, the word adventure does an awful lot of heavy lifting there. It basically is carrying the whole thing, quite honestly. This is not your traditional Star Fox game at all, and the title, and even a single trailer itself will tell you that. You really can't pretend to be surprised by the sudden shift of gameplay here. Sure, you can go ahead and be mad about it, that's true. You can go ahead and throw eggs at Rareware's headquarters if you want, but I've heard so many people online say that they were duped by Star Fox Adventures. I've heard people claim that they thought this was a brand new Lilat-focused arcade shooter and had apparently no way of telling what it was until they got home and started to play. But there's just no way. I mean, the back of the box even says, out of the cockpit and into epic adventure. You mean to tell me that this isn't going to be like Ocarina of Time? Well, what about this one? The fact that this was made by such a beloved company and that it had the Star Fox name in it definitely causes some, well, intense feelings, we'll say. As I mentioned earlier, I get it. Star Fox 64 is something I have played so many times that my own mom would randomly start humming some of the music in the car, and she had no idea what the hell a Slippy Toad even was. I was ecstatic about the ability to start and form new Star Fox memories on the GameCube. How could they expand the map? Will there be even more routes, even more secret levels? And as we all know now, the answer was no to everything. It was no to every single expectation Star Fox fans had. But the idea itself, the proposition of exploring worlds across the Lilat system with Fox and friends in a brand new 3D adventure, does also sound pretty magical. Alright, instead of complaining about everything we didn't get with Star Fox Adventures, maybe we just let it be what it is and let it speak for itself. I mean, before launch, everyone thought Metroid Prime was going to be ass, and we were all wrong about that. So let's take a look at the exhilarating and exciting potential of Star Fox Adventures. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot that isn't very great in Star Fox Adventures in terms of gameplay. I can't deny that. Combat is incredibly dull, with the only variety boiling down to sometimes you can hold the joystick in a different direction to execute a different combo, and that eventually you can freeze enemies, and that's about it. There is also a painful amount of backtracking here. The whole idea of backtracking in games is often criticized, but it can actually be a wonderful game design trick in order to get more value out of the game's assets, while simultaneously serving the player with a good dose of power creep. Good backtracking might have you explore some tunnels, and along the way you see an item that you can't yet get, so you continue on through the level, get an upgrade, beat the boss, and head back. Well, if you were attentive through your exploration, then you'll not only be rewarded with that item that you can now achieve thanks to your newfound power, but you also get that fluffy feeling of satisfaction since it was you the player who remembered that item and where it was. Traversing through an area multiple times is only bad if there's nothing in terms of variety along that trek. Metroid games often use backtracking to express player growth. Zelda tends to do the same. Titles like Tunic use it to sneakily expose shortcuts that existed all along that could have saved you loads of time, but now that you've explored the place once, you can then take advantage of these pathways, leading to a satisfaction of player knowledge rather than power growth. I mention all of this because Star Fox Adventures has so much backtracking, and all of it seems to serve a single purpose: to serve to the player that this whole thing was not meant to be this way. Honestly, this whole back and forth in the journey feels like multiple parallel quests that were cobbled up and reorganized into a single, one-directional pursuit, so the consequences of that becomes repeating visits to certain areas multiple times with no meaningful change on each recurring visit. I remember being a child and feeling like this whole thing just felt off. I didn't have the understanding of game design to quite articulate it, but I remember wondering why a game would just have me go back to the same place over and over again, but nothing's changed. I often thought about how Zelda and Metroid did the same thing, but better, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on why. It wasn't until I read a review, and I don't remember exactly where it was from, but it might have been from a gaming magazine at the time, where the critic commented that the two primary quests of Chrysoa Spirits and Spellstones felt like entirely different stories with entirely different motivations, as if it was from entirely different games. And that was it. That right there, those words, that was the exact feeling I was having as a kid playing it. And when you play Star Fox Adventures, that exact same experience will probably hit you. You'll often get to point A to get a Spellstone, only to come back to point A again very soon after, but this time to explore mostly the same area to unlock a dungeon to get a Chrysoa Spirit, only to then retrek the exact same steps again back to the hub world. It really does feel like these segments were intended to be happening either at the same time and conjoined, or were to be experienced in significantly different methods to allow for some more gameplay variety. The thing is that now, decades after Star Fox Adventures was released, we can actually validate that criticism that I had read all those years ago. We can confirm the years and years of people pondering why this design choice was made and how it felt like two parts of a larger whole that was rearranged to fill time and draw out an adventure. And that's because that's exactly what it was supposed to be. Two different characters with two different quests happening simultaneously. It's funny that for years, the exact design details of Dinosaur Planet was kept secret from people because, well, the game was canceled, but yet players were able to intuit kind of the flaws of Star Fox Adventures around design decisions made for Dinosaur Planet. Two characters with two stories. That was the intention, but Star Fox Adventures just kind of slams those things together and makes them fit. And it feels forced, but Star Fox Adventures does still have its good moments. Much like anything, it's not all bad in Star Fox Adventures, despite the fact that much of the discourse around the big old SFA is pretty negative. There's some good bits that do shine bright. How about we start with something a bit lukewarm though, like the theming. Honestly, this old Dinosaur Planet idea in a Star Fox game just comes out of nowhere, and for that, yeah, it's a bit jarring. But there's a lot on the surface that feels like it fits pretty well here. Take the speeder bike segments, for example. The music here feels like it could be right out of a game involving Fox and Friends. Some of the music in general is, if I say so myself, pretty good. Granted, some of it uses vocals samples stripped straight from Hearts of Africa Volume 1, which does feel pretty cheap.
Oh, what? You expect me to believe that you've never heard of Heart of Africa Volume 1? Me neither.
I've heard several people make the argument that the soundtrack here is one of David Weiss's best, and while I can't even remotely agree with that sentiment, I do think the soundtrack is genuinely underappreciated. Like, check out the Thorntail Hollow well music. Yeah, it has such a subtle feeling of adventure and wonder as you stumble around this area. Or what about this gorgeous track that plays as you move through the Chrysoa Palace? Weiss does a great job of presenting a theme that is filled with tranquility while simultaneously putting this mysterious unease in the player's ears. Yeah, and I mean, hell, even the opening battle music against the Galleon right in the beginning of the game is incredibly hype. Granted, we're actually going to come back to this song because there's a little surprise I have at the end. Something that I can't seem to shake, and it destroys the theming of this quest, is just how many stock sound effects there are. I know it's been pretty harped on by so many people, but if you've played a lot of games from the N64 era, then you will notice so many noises from other games. So while you might have some really awesome thematic continuity, like how most of the technology from the weapons, to the speeder bikes, to the ancient magic future tech, and all of that, it just feels like it could fit within the Star Fox universe, sitting side by side from sound effects that you've heard elsewhere feels really weird. Granted, I do find this a bit of a strange point to sit on for too long, because a lot of this is going to be experiential based on how much media you've consumed in your life. So while some like myself constantly hear noises that reminded them of other games like Pokemon Stadium, Extreme G, or Turok, which by the way, when am I doing that Turok retrospective series? Am I right, boys? Yeah? Am I right? Does anyone like Turok at all besides me? Maybe someone will let me know. But for others, they'll just not notice anything and continue on through Star Fox adventures like nothing is odd or out of place. Okay, there's definitely something out of place. But I gotta be honest here. I actually love when games make up languages. I really do. In general, the mystery and artificiality always tricks me into being more immersed into a made-up fantasy world. One of my favorite components of Final Fantasy X is trying to slowly uncover the language of the Al Bhed. The gibberish that comes from the mouths of the two boys and brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, forces you to really feel the inflection and the emotion of the boys, rather than just specifically listening to their words, which adds such a deeper, a more primal aspect of understanding to the two boys' conversations. I mean, Blizzard created a full dictionary of their Kalani language in StarCraft, which adds an even richer mysticism to the Protoss and their culture. Or heck, even just yelling to Trico in The Last Guardian just always felt like it fit. And don't get me started on the Journey chirping, man. In Journey, just every chirp just has, it means so much more than chirp. If you've played it, you know exactly what I mean. Point is, I absolutely love made-up languages in games, and the Dino Speak in Star Fox Adventures is absolutely awkward as hell. I know the language has a dictionary of translation of like what letter in English is to what letter in Dino Speak, and I get it. I think the language itself actually sounds really cool. It gives off a bit of an ancient tribalistic feeling with its smaller words and harsh sounds. I really wish I liked it more, but when this happens, just feels weird. Nixo Kixo Vizboom Atiad Kaj. Honestly, for me, the most immersion-breaking part of this whole thing is the delivery of the lines. You can tell whenever Dino Speak comes up that the voice actors have to physically slow down their delivery and read out the words to make sure that it sounds correct rather than natural. Quite honestly, they sound like amateurs learning a new language. And these voice actors are fine on their own, but clearly they either weren't comfortable enough reading through this made-up language, or maybe they weren't provided enough time in order to get comfortable with it in order to record. The voice actress for Krystal, for example, she's clearly having to put some real effort into the Dino Speak. And since the game gives Fox a translator pretty early on, she's like one of the only ones who has to do most of the reading in the language, more than pretty much any other character. And it just kind of exposes some of the flaws in the delivery. Once you escape the Dino Talk, the crew and the voice actors, just speaking in their native languages, they do an amazing job.
And I'll be right with you, okay?
Oh, Tricky, dear Tricky, my precious little boy Tricky. How the internet aggressively hates you so, while I just sit in my corner and shut my mouth. But that ends today. Today's the day I speak my mind. I'm going to free myself from that cage that I feared so long from rattling. I will confess to you. I will confess to you all. I don't get the hate for Tricky. I remember hating this little guy my first playthrough back in the day. I heard the internet's seemingly unanimous loathing of him as a sidekick, and I set off on my adventure prepared to spend about 5 straight minutes in this script just complaining about Tricky. But then, like 15 or so hours later after I was done, I realized he never bothered me. Like, at all. He really doesn't talk nearly as much as I remembered. Honestly, feeding him the mushrooms occasionally, isn't a big deal. His AI is pretty good when you need him to do commands. Considering the freedom the character has to move about the world, the fact that he never got stuck on me once feels like a miracle coming out of this era of gaming. Yeah, I came in ready to swing and hate on this Diddy Kong racing boss turned animal companion, but after playing it again, I think he's fine.
Whew. Wow. That took a lot of courage. That took a lot of strength to kind of get out and say that and put it on the internet for permanent record, basically. Probably about as much strength as it took to do that stupid test in the Lightfoot village.
When I was a kid, I pretty much lived on 2D platformers, and probably none ate my time as much as Donkey Kong Country. Despite eating, breathing, and sleeping DKC for quite a while, it's a bit embarrassing to say that I actually never beat the game until years later. No matter how many times I tried, no matter how many attempts I gave it, I could just never get past one particular stage, Blackout Basement. No matter how hard I persevered, it just never happened. Years and years went by, and another Rareware game would flash me back to those embarrassing moments. Star Fox Adventures. Eventually, you hit a point in the game where you are kidnapped by some small dinosaurs called Lightfoot. In a rather funny misunderstanding, you are given 2 tests that, if completed, you'll be given your innocence. The first test of tracking is incredibly easy and has some really good music to back it up.
But that second test, that test of strength, requires you to smash the A button harder than any YouTuber has ever asked you to hit like and subscribe. That thing was nuts. I remember as a kid being physically unable to do it for so long. Days and days of attempts went by, and I just couldn't hit the damn button fast enough. So funny enough, I actually remember laying down in my living room for hours trying to do the test of strength, just mashing that A button as fast as I could, and it wasn't until one lucky attempt, one try, where I finally got it. But I wasn't even looking at the screen. I was just too busy hitting the A button, so I thought I just failed again, and happened to look up and saw a different cutscene. Thank God. But now, as an adult, I'm a little bit better. I'm a little stronger. I've been training for years. I've been preparing for this exact moment. I'm ready. Let's go! What? Wow. My kid self must have been absolute shit at video games.
You know, so much of the reason I even started this whole damn retrospective series on Star Fox games in particular was to get revenge on this trial of strength section, but beating it now, it just feels like punching a child. You know, like I'm glad I did it, but I don't feel particularly good about it.
Wait. Actually, nah, that's good. Leave it.
What makes it all the more annoying is that the lack of satisfaction from this challenge really amplified just how eager I was to be done already with Star Fox Adventures. Like I mentioned before, the gameplay is fine and all, but it's so repetitive that you'll find yourself almost in a trance as you just float on through the game's storyline. Gameplay isn't egregiously bad, nor is it particularly good. It's confidently adequate, and when so little changes through the 15 or so hour journey, it's really hard to keep paying attention as your eyes just kind of gloss over as you just hit A over and 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 over again to win every single scenario. Everything about the gameplay just feels functional. Okay, that doesn't maybe sound like that big of a criticism, because it kind of isn't, but it also kind of is. If you've played Star Fox Adventures, I think you know exactly what I mean. The gameplay, the controls, and the mechanics are perfectly serviceable. No more, no less. Except for the fact that they used the same aiming as Jet Force Gemini, which really pisses me off. I am in the camp that Jet Force Gemini is an incredibly overlooked gem on the N64, but the aiming is easily the worst part of that whole experience. Why would you want to bring that back? Actually, thinking about it further, so much of this gameplay style actually feels a lot like a predecessor to Cameo Elements of Power. Yeah, Cameo released right at the start of the Xbox 360's life several years later, but the momentum, the combat animations, the level design, and heck, the visuals to an extent, everything feels so much like it was preparing for Cameo, and I don't think I would have noticed that if I didn't just replay it a couple years ago in order to make a video that I never ended up releasing. So that's a little awkward. By the way, it's actually a really, really fun Rareware game if you haven't tried it yet, and it's really cheap to get. It's part of the Rare Replay pack, and both Rare Replay as well as the original 360 version are backwards compatible on the Series X, so give it a shot. Everything just is fine with Star Fox Adventures. The puzzles in SFA are fine. The bosses are mostly fine. I mean, the bartering system with the merchant is pretty fun until you realize just how easy it is to game the system, since there's fundamentally no consequence at all for being too aggressive in your haggling, which makes it now go from fun to fine. However, his dialogue and incredibly weird sounding voice are pretty timeless.
You pay this much. No, that's too low. Okay, I'll sell it to you.
You're damn right you will. It's clearly no secret by this point that I'm not the biggest fan of Star Fox Adventures. Whether it's the mundane action, the lack of exciting rewards for all the collectibles that exist, the many plot holes. Basically, every time I say something good about the game, I feel compelled to knock it down a couple pegs immediately after. But oddly enough, I don't hate it either. I didn't enjoy my time playing it, and I often found myself in this comatose state where I was pressing the buttons, but there was no brain function happening. In so many ways, this really isn't a good game that tends to escape being legitimately bad by doing everything so just well enough that you sometimes forget the bad, since so much of everything is just forgettable anyway. But I really want to give some genuine credit to a few things, because there are some things that are just good, and I hate to not give credit where credit is due. Well, here we go. Nothing but positives. The setup for this game is actually pretty awesome when you think about it. I know it's not a true Star Fox game, but having the crew go out on a more traditional fantasy adventure on a planet that could easily fit within the Star Fox world is easily the thing that kept me excited to try out the game all those years ago. The world of Dinosaur Planet itself is also really cool and just oozes with that Rareware style and charm. General Scales is a wonderfully set up villain that completely steals the spotlight every time he's on screen. It's a shame that he's not around very often, but the citizens of the world constantly reference his cruelty. Everyone is terrified of this overlord, and it allows General Scales to have so much intensity in his destruction without needing to be physically present all the time. It reminds me of how all of the NPCs in Breath of the Wild refer to Ganon and the Calamity. He isn't present at all except for like the final 20 minutes or so of that game, but his devastation is felt everywhere. Scales is the same. He's not thwarting you at every other turn like Team Rocket from Pokemon, but you know full well just how powerful he is by the results of his actions and the fear from the citizens. And then you finally meet him atop the Krazoa Palace itself for the ultimate showdown. This is it. Your reign of tyranny ends here.
Scales, you are no longer any use to me.
Who are you? I demand you show yourself!
I've been looking forward to this day.
Fat. Oh shoot! I said I was only gonna say nice things. It's pretty. Yeah, the game is pretty. Nah, but joking aside, this is actually one of the best looking games on the GameCube, and honestly, one of the most impressive looking titles, probably of the entire console generation. Star Fox Adventures is a technical marvel that, with no other enhancements other than some basic upscaling, the game can look absolutely stunning to this very day. Seriously, I have no jokes for this one. Star Fox Adventures is beautiful, and nothing can take that away from it. Except for the whole Andross twist and the fact that Falco wasn't even in the game at all, and you wouldn't even know that unless you read a manga that acts as a prequel. Those might make it a bit more of a bummer than I originally planned. Some people will love Star Fox Adventures for the 3D adventure game that it is, and others will hate it forever and firmly believe that there was something wrong with the chi diffusers on this one. For myself, I don't really know if I stand in either of those rivalrous camps. I don't hate the game. But if I also never played it again, I think I'd be happy. And for many, that's where this topic tends to end, but not today. Everyone who has an opinion on Star Fox Adventures seems to agree with one thing, this one unifying singularity that kind of makes the fighting stop. And that's the fact that everyone at least wishes we got to see that original vision of Dinosaur Planet. And unfortunately, it's really not been playable until now. Yeah, so I was gonna buy a house, but I think a prototype version of Dinosaur Planet was the better purchase. Now, the only real question I have is, how do I get this to play on a Nintendo 64? Oh, get out of there. Now, how do I... Oh my god. Oh my god, we're playing it. We're playing Dinosaur fucking Planet. Holy sh! This is nuts. This is not. I never thought this would ever be possible, but here it is. This is it. This is here it is. I just can't believe it. We're playing Dinosaur Planet on a real Nintendo 64. I'm so. I think I'm getting so excited to make myself sick. Screw my health. I have a video game to play. Come on. Every time I play a new video game, I just love to let the openings play out as the developers get an opportunity to prime the player for the journey that they are about to set off on. But this one is especially exciting since there's so much going on here that never ends up happening in Star Fox Adventures. Entire areas and landscapes are just absent in the final release of the game, and some of them look beautiful. Oh, Saber, can you? Hey, get out of there, bad boy. No crotch sniffing. There's even a full set of menu options here to play around with. Granted, basically none of them work, but it's cool to see nonetheless. But how about the game itself? I cannot wait. All right, here we go. So we loaded to the scene in the sky and, hello? It crashed. It crashed. 5 seconds in, and we already crash. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, let's try this one more time and... Hey, yeah, now it's working. All right, awesome. That's exciting.
I've had a garbled message from the wizard. Something about a floating mountain hidden within a store.
Oh, hello, English? So I guess the whole dinosaur speak, or Saurian as fans would later call it, was not originally intended? That's interesting. Oh, but wait! So, okay, hold on. Let's test that theory I had earlier about how people's issue isn't specifically the dino speak and the back and forth between English and non-English. I still felt that the larger issue was the delivery, so let's give it a shot. We can actually test this theory out.
I've had a garbled message from the wizard. Something about a floating mountain hidden within a store. Why he thinks Princess Kite will be out here, I don't know.
Yep. I can only speak for myself here, but yep. That's exactly why Krystal's dialogue always felt so off to me. It's the same voice actress and everything here, but the inflection in the delivery of the N64 version sounds so much more natural. Honestly though, listening back to this again back to back impresses me with how well Estelle Ellis still delivered those lines. For a made-up language, and despite having the deliveries feel a bit stiff, she moves through the words pretty smoothly. Huge props there. This opening of Dinosaur Planet also exposes something else though. Did you see how intuitive that opening was? It just kind of started and we were right there, off at the cutscene. Judging by the concern and confusion in Krystal's voice, Rareware also nailed this great example of in medias res. Basically the idea that the story is already happening in the middle of the plot. We're right in, and we can already tell so much about Krystal and the setup of the journey through normal discussion. But in Star Fox Adventures, on the other hand, it has to go through this wall of text that you have to read. In Dinosaur Planet, Krystal is searching for a cloud runner named Princess Kite, but in SFA, it's something about Krystal's parents' deaths and how she's in the Lilat system now. Even this line, being of kind nature, Krystal decides to investigate. Well, we know she got a distress signal and is investigating because the dialogue about 2 seconds later tells us exactly that. This is the kind of sloppiness that happens when you're forced to change the entire plot and character motivations after you've already committed and told a totally different story. Anyway, the rest of the opening of Dinosaur Planet is almost identical to that of Star Fox Adventures. You fight the galleon in the sky just like before, and bump into General Scales, who sounds significantly less threatening than he does in Star Fox Adventures.
Scales, ruler, tyrant, and dictator of the Sharpclaw tribe. And who might you be, animal girl?
However, one meaningful difference is that the random bird in the cage at the start of Star Fox Adventures, yeah, you know the one that I was joking about earlier about how apparently this is the only example we have of strength for General Scales that we can see early on, is that he's so strong he can put a tiny bird in a cage? Yeah, well, it makes a lot more sense when that tiny little bird is a princess that is being held against her will as a ransom to force the Cloud Runner Queen to answer to Scales. Oh, that makes him way more menacing. As the ship is crashing towards the planet, Scales teleports out instead of the whole choking and dragging Krystal across the ship. Oh, that makes him way less menacing. As Krystal rights the ship, we get our opening credit sequence, which finally lets us hear that galleon theme that I mentioned at the start of the Star Fox Adventures bit. And this opening sequence is way better of a transition to the hype of adventure than what we got in the final product. As the ship finally arrives at Warlock Mountain, we're met with the same dying Earthwalkers from before in Star Fox, but this time, the dialogue, the oppressive atmosphere, the writing, and the animations, it's just kind of everything just makes us feel like way more of a crushing first stage than before. Most of the stage itself is basically just the first Krazoa Palace section like Star Fox Adventures, but with the wizard teaching you the fireball and Scales coming back to steal his ship and take Princess Kite away. Also, there are these damn terrifying looking jellyfish creatures. From here, we find a portal off Warlock Mountain, only to bump into a swap stone named Rubble, who sets up the major gimmick of this game: being able to play as 2 different characters with 2 parallel stories happening simultaneously. It's here where that critic that I mentioned earlier yet again is proven to be correct, the one who decades ago pinpointed that the narrative disconnect in Star Fox Adventures felt like 2 separate stories slammed together. Well, that's because Saber and Krystal are on 2 completely different quests. They have seemingly no interaction with each other, and the only connection they share is that they both know the wizard. And that seems to be it. Dinosaur Planet continues to use that style of in medias res yet again when you swap to Saber's story. When you set off to find Tricky in Star Fox Adventures, the whole scenario that takes place always felt a bit abrupt and kind of out of nowhere. Well, that makes perfect sense now when you consider that Saber's quest quite literally starts with him abruptly and out of nowhere stumbling upon Prince Tricky. Granted, he had been looking for him, but in terms of gameplay, we bump into him pretty immediately, and it does come as a bit of a shock to both Saber, hey, and us. Funny enough, the dialogue for this scene versus Star Fox Adventures is practically identical, and they even go so far as to even replicate that incredibly long and drawn out fall off the snow bike. That's kind of cool. I know a lot of people hate that scene. I always thought it was kind of goofy and pretty fun. This leads us on to a tag team adventure with Saber and Tricky working to collect all of the spell stones. The core gameplay is pretty much the same as what would end up happening in Star Fox Adventures, but something I like particularly more in Dinosaur Planet is how many small puzzles exist in the world that don't directly get attention drawn to them. There's an incentive to explore here that is sorely lacking from the final GameCube release. There's also this guy who's just frozen in place blocking your path. Oh, how I miss playing alpha builds of games, man. Oh, and the bomb spores are still in the game too. Let me just get one of these and... Yeah, come on. Yeah, I can... Yeah. Ah, damn it. Yo, these are way harder to get than in Star Fox Adventures. All right, one more time. Maybe. Come on! It's at this point things change pretty dramatically as we go down this river rapids sequence and end up in a bay that doesn't exist in Adventures. Also, Tricky talks to one of the dinosaurs and mentions that we already have a spellstone. Oh, we do? Well, damn, Tricky, we're good at this. And then the game bugged out and I started writing a log on land, through a door, and on lava, and nice. This is actually kind of funny. As mentioned before, you can actually swap between Krystal and Saber at any time, just as long as you go back to one of the two swap stones, whether that's rocky or rubble. And what's actually kind of always been curious to me, though, playing this now, is we don't know if there was ever going to be kind of like a visual cue at all in order to indicate to the player that now is a good time to go swap, or if there was just going to not be a cue and have it be less directed. In fact, I actually think that would have been a cooler game design mechanic. Like, I think just leaving it to the player to kind of intuit and try to figure it out as like a puzzle to solve, similar to the Mermaid's Cave in Oracle of Ages, I think that would be way better. Either way, if you swap back to Krystal at this point, we're brought to an entirely new area that exists just outside Lightfoot Village. It's here that Krystal would continue on her adventure to Cape Claw, which, to be fair, looks nowhere near as good as the GameCube version, and a Sharp Claw Fortress in order to save Princess Kite finally for good. So, yeah, not only do you play as two different characters, but each character also has their very own animal companion, each with their own specific skill set. A little bit further, and this leads us to Discovery Falls. Oh man, this is such a beautiful environment for the N64. The giant open landscape with the rushing water. It's so pretty. On a level design angle, there's also so much verticality in the traversal here that it really helps invigorate Dinosaur Planet with this feeling that it's so much larger of a game than it really is. This area specifically helps everything feel so grand and epic. It imbues our journey with a true sense of scale and wonder. This is what adventure is all about, and ironically, what many tend to find Star Fox Adventures missing. There are all these little puzzles to solve that unlock seemingly random little pathways and treasures and items. And then the game crashed on me and corrupted the save file, and now I can't load it anymore. I know it might not seem like a lot, but what we just went over, there's so much more going on in that demo than I'm really able to tap into. If it's fully playable one day, I will be returning and I will be playing through the entire thing, because while it's clearly a pre-alpha build and broken and a bit of a mess, it genuinely doesn't work half the time, it was still pretty f***ing fun. There's so much lore here in Dinosaur Planet that doesn't show itself in Star Fox Adventures, like the Wizard Randorn, or some crazy Krazoa lore about how the Great Dragon and the Krazoa are like the earliest life forms in the universe. There was apparently a massive war that eradicated so much, but the results of which just so also happened to create life on this planet. Playing as the cocky and dismissive Saber puts into perspective why, out of nowhere, Fox was, well, cocky and dismissive. Fox always felt like he was a different character entirely, but that's because he was a different character entirely. Oh, and the merchant still exists in Dinosaur Planet, which is probably the most important thing to take away from all this. Actually, the really most important takeaway from all this is to remember all of the insanely wonderful work that is being done on the Dinosaur Planet wiki and the dedicated folks on the Dinosaur Planet community Discord who release patches and bug fixes to the dumped ROM of the game constantly. There are updates happening all the time, and through their hard work, we may eventually have a fully functional build of the game that explores every bit of content that Rareware had made up to this point. Star Fox Adventures is a bit of a mess. Whether you're on the side who absolutely hates it, or you adore it and defend it constantly, there's no denying that this was not the way anyone wanted Rareware's final Nintendo exclusive release to be. So many agree that this was bittersweet, and we're hoping that Rare would return one day to make a Nintendo exclusive that was legendary once again, just so the final piece of the story was on such a high note. But I don't actually care about that. Rareware during the 90s and early 2000s is one of the greatest developer stories in all of gaming. They pushed ground everywhere and challenged the greatest franchises at their own game, and oftentimes won. The achievements of Banjo-Kazooie, of GoldenEye, of Perfect Dark, of Diddy Kong Racing, and so many other games, they aren't at all tainted just because the fan reception of Star Fox Adventures was a bit crappy. Sure, the world would probably have been a better place if we both got a new Star Fox game as well as Dinosaur Planet, but there are still so many people out there who absolutely adore Star Fox Adventures. And yeah, I think they're a bit crazy and they need to lay off some of the Bafomdad juice. At the end of the day though, just because I'm not happy doesn't mean I can't be happy for them. For me, Star Fox Adventures marks a frustrating misstep that deprived the world of a true Rareware Zelda clone in their classic style. It complicated my love for the Star Fox series, but it did not make me love Star Fox 64 less, nor did it make me appreciate Rareware less. They are still one of my all-time favorite developers who released some life-changing adventures, while the current company is nothing like it used to be. When I look back on the 90s, I will always love this era of Rareware forever. But realistically, this is where things get really complicated. The first 2 games in the Star Fox series are masterpieces in their own right, and Star Fox Adventures is just kind of some side story that some people love and others hate. But the rest of the series, it's about to get really confusing, so I hope you've enjoyed the kind of pleasure ride we've had so far. Because with Star Fox Assault, it's out of the cockpit yet again. Bye-bye!